Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 7th of 2025, and given that the press tour for Snow White 2025 is already an utter disaster for the Walt Disney Company, for CEO Bob Iger, and those behind the creative team of Snow White, we're talking about like director Mark Webb, we're talking about writer, of course, Greta Gerwig, who's going through a lot of issues right now when it comes down to Snow White. But when it all boils down to both Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler, this is where a lot of issues are beginning to erupt, both behind the scenes and in the public eye, when it all involves this movie in particular that is really costing Disney tens of millions of dollars when it comes to their marketing campaign that is failing every single day. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we know that she is not only very difficult to work with, but she's also very insufferable, self-absorbed, very much a know-it-all type of person when it comes to her on set and how she actually does get involved in a lot of scenes that are very complex. And that's exactly why there were a lot of reshoots involving Snow White. We have a lot to go over here when it comes to the feud between both Gal and Rachel and what's really going on there beyond what you saw at the Oscars of 2025 when they weren't really looking at each other at all. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that we know that Snow White as a whole is going to be one of the worst box office failures for the Walt Disney Company. Even Disney themselves are actually projecting this to be a box office failure. That's when you know that this is going to be a big nightmare, not just for the executives, but also for everyone else attached to the film. Whether you're Mark Webb, the director, or Greta Gerwig, the writer, or anybody else attached to this thing, such as Rachel Zegler. And it's quite, a shame that Gal signed on for this project years ago. I think that she should have known better at the time and should have really just shied away from this project, but I digress. Interestingly enough, with the Walt Disney Company already in damage control mode over their film Snow White starring Zegler, who has been a massive, of course, nightmare for the executives. One development going on now involves more to do with actress Gal Gadot and what she recently did toward Rachel Zegler. Now, a crucial update to the entire Snow White drama now involves how Gal specifically demanded Disney executives to cancel a series of events in order to not associate or be seen with Rachel Zegler. A shocking turn of events is that, as it turns out, it was Gal who specifically put her foot down to refuse to appear at the UK premiere of Snow White, and this is what ultimately led Disney to canceling and scrapping their premiere for the film in the UK, since the entire Disney board knew that this would look bad to have the two separated at a premiere like that. Now, to make matters worse, for Zegler's sake, is that Gal also demanded Disney to separate themselves from, of course, between her and Zegler, while doing any future PR interviews for the film. This stems from both personal and professional issues. On the professional side, on multiple occasions, Zegler surprisingly was very difficult to work with when doing scenes with, of course, Gal, where it took dozens of takes in certain scenes that hindered Gal's performance as the evil queen, something that Gal did not appreciate at all. Get this, already Disney CEO Bob Iger is informing the marketing team behind Snow White to withdraw from debuting a special featurette, a behind-the-scenes reel, so to speak, that included both Zegler and Gal as Snow White and the Evil Queen. Now, Gal specifically wanted this behind-the-scenes reel that was supposed to be released to the public on March 15th, canceled, and Disney ultimately decided to do so, as they are beginning to side with Gal on many arguments and issues that she had with Zegler over time, since Rachel created all the problems for Disney right from the get-go. Now, the Snow White premiere in the US will also no longer involve a full-on performance that was supposed to include both Rachel Zegler and Gal singing side-by-side live on stage that was aimed to be live-streamed online. The entire performance was cancelled due to Gal also putting her foot down and taking a stand to not appear alongside Rachel Zegler. Now, guys, before I move on about this, let me just say one thing here that I think is a very interesting topic, is the fact that they were going to have these two massive premieres, one in the UK, one in the US. The US one, as far as we know, is still on. The UK one is scrapped, and a lot of that had to do with, Gal Gadot wanting nothing to do with Rachel Zegler. That was basically the big deal breaker there, because they knew it would look bad. As far as the US is concerned, I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they do decide to do that big premiere the way it was supposed to be, where you were going to have a lot of performances. The main one is indeed scrapped. You're not going to have Rachel and Gal live on stage during a live stream singing from a specific theme song, so to speak, from Snow White 25. But that's when you know that Disney is in pure panic mode. That's when you know that they screwed up terribly bad. And Bob Iger knows it, the executives know it, the board of directors surely do know it at this point, and that's why you're not seeing a ton of commercials on television, you're not seeing a lot of ads online per se, as much as you should, right? That's why they cut back on the marketing funds for the marketing campaign. Very similar to what Netflix did with Meghan Markle's series, very similar to what they also did with Captain America 4 toward the tail end of the marketing campaign. I mean, the list goes on and on. But interestingly enough, it only gets worse from this point forward. The only exception that Gal made was at the Oscars, and even then the two didn't even look at each other as the feud between the two actresses continue and only gets worse. Now, Rachel reportedly was deeply offended over Gal's demands, and this erupted the entire situation that only worsened everything behind closed doors. So again, I don't know if you guys caught that little glimpse of the two on stage at the Oscars. It looked very awkward. They just refused to even look at each other. Gal wouldn't make a first move. Rachel wouldn't make a first move to turn her head. Nobody would actually look at each other. And it just was straight at the camera as much as possible. There were even times where they weren't even blinking that much. It was quite awkward. So even throughout the test screenings, Gal was very unhappy to learn that there was zero chemistry between herself and Zegler for the scenes that they shot together. Many, however, not all of those scenes were in fact deleted, many of which were shot back in 2022 and 23 that ultimately were thrown in the trash. Now, Rachel is already attempting to fight back against Disney behind the scenes to get those actual sequences out to the public on the digital version of Snow White that they do want to actually debut on May, of 2025, this year. This year, they want the digital version out as fast as possible to get this movie done and over with. Now, one thing about that, I think that's another piece of living proof that Disney fully expects that this movie is going to be a total trash fire. If they're planning a digital release by May of this year, that's very, very fast, and it just goes to show you that this movie is going to last very little in theaters, maybe a couple of weeks at maximum, and then it's just going to dissipate. But ultimately, I think it's a very interesting development that you have Gal, who really put her foot down. She took a stand for herself. She tried to really just tell Disney she wants nothing to do with Rachel Zegler because it's really tainting her image as an actress. It's tainting her overall professionalism as far as how she tried to handle the entire drama with Snow White. And look, for the most part, Gal stayed out of it, right? She wasn't really saying all these nonsense things back in 2022, 2023, as we covered years ago. It was all Rachel Zegler saying all of those things, and even getting very political, mind you, both on social media / Twitter at the time, and also really saying the things about Snow White 1937. It really dragged the movie in the mud, and it really is not going to be able to get cleaned off. But overall, Rachel Zegler, I think, knows exactly what's coming. She can lie as much as she wants to, saying it's going to be successful. It surely will not be. But I would love to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.